Wait, fuck. Oh, I don't think anybody besides the New York Post has access to that hard drive right now. Actually, I don't even know if the New York Post does. It might only be Giuliani that does. If you're wondering why other people aren't like reporting on it actively, unless that's changed. Trump had one last story to sell. The Wall Street Journal wouldn't buy it. Inside, the White House's secret last-ditch effort to change the narrative in the election and the return of the media gatekeepers. By early October, even people inside the White House believed President Trump's re-election campaign needed a desperate rescue mission. So 3 men allied with the president gathered at a house in McLean, Virginia to launch one. The host was Arthur Schwartz, a New York public relations man close to President Trump's eldest son, Donald Jr. The guests were a White House lawyer, Eric Hirschman, and a former Deputy White House counsel, Stefan Passantino, according to 2 people familiar with the meeting. Mr. Hirschman knew the subject matter they were there to discuss. He had represented Mr. Trump during the impeachment trial early this year, and he tried to deflect allegations against the president in part by pointing to Hunter Biden's work in Ukraine. More recently, he had been working on the White House payroll with a hazy portfolio, listed as a senior advisor to the president, and remains close to Jared Kushner. The 3 had pinned their hopes for re-electing the president on a 4th guest, a straight-shooting Wall Street Journal White House reporter named Michael Bender. They delivered the goods to him there, a cache of emails detailing Hunter Biden's business activities, and, on speakerphone, a former business partner of Hunter Biden's named Tony Bobulinski. Bobulinski? Mr. Bobulinski was willing to go on the record in the Journal with an explosive claim that Joe Biden, the former vice president, had been aware of and profited from his son's activities. The Trump team left believing that the Journal would blow the thing open, and their excitement was conveyed to the president. The Journal had seemed to be the perfect outlet for a story the Trump advisors believed could sink Mr. Biden's candidacy. Its small c conservatism in reporting means the work of its news pages carries credibility across the industry, and its readership leans further right than other big news outlets. Its Washington bureau chief, Paul Beckett, recently remarked at a virtual gathering of Journal reporters and editors that while he knows that the paper often delivers unwelcome news to the many Trump supporters who read it, the Journal should protect its unique position of being trusted across the political spectrum, 2 people familiar with the remarks said. As the Trump team waited with excited anticipation for a Journal expose, the newspaper did its due diligence. Mr. Bender and Mr. Beckett handed the story off to a well-regarded China correspondent, James Arity, and a Capitol Hill reporter who had followed the Hunter Biden story, Andrew Duren. Mr. Arity interviewed Mr. Bobulinski. They began drafting an article. Then things got messy. Without warning, his notional allies, Rudy Giuliani, the former New York mayor and now a lawyer for President Trump, burst... I'm sorry. Hold on, I did this wrong. Without warning his notional allies, Rudy Giuliani, the former New York mayor and now a lawyer for Mr.
Bababooey.
Hold on, I'm pausing this. I'm sorry, okay. Where were we? And now a lawyer for President Trump burst onto the scene with the tabloid version of McLean Crew's carefully laid plot. Mr. Giuliani delivered a cache... I see him saying cache, it's a cache, I'm sorry. Mr. Giuliani delivered a cache of documents of questionable provenance, but containing some of the same emails, to the New York Post, a sister publication to the Journal, and Rupert Murdoch's News Corps. Mr. Giuliani had been working with the former Trump aide, Steve Bannon, who also began leaking some of the emails to favored right-wing outlets. Then things got messy. We'll just start here again, okay? Then things got messy. Without warning his notional allies, Rudy Giuliani, the former New York mayor and now a lawyer for President Trump, burst onto the scene with the tabloid version of the McLean Crew's carefully laid plot. Mr. Giuliani delivered a cache of documents of questionable provenance, but containing some of the same emails to the New York Post, a sister publication to the Journal, and Rupert Murdoch's News Corps. Mr. Giuliani had been working with the former Trump aide Steve Bannon, who also began leaking some of the emails to favored right-wing outlets. Mr. Giuliani's complicated claim that the emails came from a laptop Hunter Biden had abandoned, and his refusal to let some reporters examine the laptop, cast a pall over the story, as did the Post's reporting, which alleged but could not prove that Joe Biden had been involved in his son's activities. While the Trump team was clearly jumpy, editors in the Journal's Washington bureau were wrestling with a central question. Could the documents, or Mr. Bobulinski, prove that Joe Biden was involved in his son's lobbying? Or was this yet another story of the younger Mr. Biden trading on his family's name? A perfectly good theme, but not a new one, or one that needed urgently to be revealed before the election. Mr. Trump and his allies expected the Journal story to appear Monday, October 19th, according to Mr. Bannon. That would be late in the campaign, but not too late, and could shape that week's news cycle heading into the crucial final debate last Thursday. An important piece in the journal would be coming soon, Mr. Trump told aides on a conference call that day. Oh, I remember that, saying that there was like a big story that was going to be dropping or whatever. The president tells staff on call that the Wall Street Journal is working on an important piece. Good one. His comment was not appreciated inside the Journal. The editors didn't like Trump's insinuation that we were being teed up to do this hit job, a Journal reporter who wasn't directly involved in the story told me. But the reporters continued to work on the draft as the Thursday debate approached, indifferent to the White House's frantic timeline. Finally, Mr. Bobulinski got tired of waiting. He got spooked about whether they were going to do it or not, Mr. Bannon said. At 7:35 Wednesday evening, Mr. Bobulinski emailed an on-the-record 684-word statement making his case to a range of news outlets. Breitbart News published it in full. He appeared the next day in Nashville to attend the debate as Mr. Trump's surprised guest. And less than 2 hours before the debate was to begin, he read a 6-minute statement to the press detailing his allegations that the former vice president had involvement in his son's business dealings. When Mr. Trump stepped on stage, the president acted as though the details of the emails and the allegations were common knowledge. "You're the big man, I think. I don't know. Maybe you're not," he told Mr. Biden at some point, a reference to an ambiguous sentence from the documents. As the debate ended, the Wall Street Journal published a brief item, just the stub of Mr. Uredi and Mr. Duran's reporting. The core of it was that Mr. Bobulinski had failed to prove the central claim. Corporate records reviewed by the Wall Street Journal show no role for Joe Biden, the Journal reported. Asked about the Journal's handling of the story, the editor-in-chief, Matt Murray, said the paper... said the paper did not discuss its news gathering. "Our rigorous and trusted journalism speaks for itself," Mr. Murray said in an emailed statement. And if you'd been watching the debate, but hadn't been obsessively watching Fox News or reading Breitbart, you would have had no idea what Mr. Trump was talking about. The story the Trump team hoped would upend the campaign was fading fast. The gatekeepers return. The McLean Group's failed attempt to sway the election is partly just another story revealing the chaotic, threadbare quality of the Trump operation, a far cry from the coordinated disinformation machinery feared by liberals. But it's also about a larger shift in the American media, one in which the gatekeepers appear to have returned after a long absence. It has been a disorienting couple of decades, after all. It all began when the Drudge Report, Gawker, and the blog started telling you what stodgy old newspapers and television news networks wouldn't. Then social media brought floods of content pouring over the old barricades. By 2015, the old gatekeepers had entered a kind of crisis of confidence, believing that they couldn't control the online news cycle any better than King Canute could control the tides. I have no idea what this references to, but I feel like I should know. It's either biblical or... Oh, wait, we have Wikipedia right here. Was the king of Denmark, England, and Norway, together often seen as the North Sea Empire. Yet after the deaths of his heirs and the decade of his own, his legacy was lost. The legend of King Canute and the Tide is an apocryphal anecdote illustrating the I don't know how to pronounce all this. Piety, or humility of King Canute the Great, recorded in the... this is apocryphal, right? Apocryphal means it's probably made up. Oh, shit, sorry. I need to get rid of chat. In the story, Canute demonstrates to his flattering courtiers, people trying to court him, that he has no control over the elements, the incoming tide, explaining that secular power is vain compared to the supreme power of God. The episode is frequently alluded to in context where the futility of trying to stop the tide of an inexorable event is pointed out, but usually misrepresenting Canute as believing he had supernatural powers, when Huntington's story in fact relates the opposite. Oh, so they actually used it improperly here, and the Wikipedia article points out that people oftentimes miscite the story. Wow. Courtiers? They are his court. Oh, like his advisors and shit, huh? People of the court. Henry Huntington tells the story is one of 3 examples of Canute's graceful and magnificent behavior outside of the bravery and warfare, the other 2 being his arrangement of the marriage of his daughter to the later Holy Roman Emperor and the negotiations of reduction of tolls on the roads across Gaul at Rome and the Imperial. In Huntington's account, Canute set his throne by the seashore and commanded the incoming tide to halt and not wet his feet in robes. Yet, continuing to rise as usual, the tide dashed over his feet and legs without respect to his royal person. Then the king leapt backwards, saying, "Let all men know how empty and worthless is the power of kings, for there is none worthy of the name, but he whom heaven, earth, and sea obey by eternal laws." He then hung his gold crown on a crucifix and never would again, to the honor of God, the Almighty King. Later, historians repeated the story, most of them adjusting it to have Canute more clearly aware that the tides would not obey him, and staging the scene to rebuke the flattery of his courtiers. Is that what you used to pronounce it? Proverbial reference to the legend in modern journalism or politics usually casts the story in terms of Canute's arrogance or attempting to stop the tide. As to usage, however, the Economist Style Guide writes, does every news publication have like a style guide? I guess they would, right? Canute's exercise on the seahorse was designed to persuade his courtiers, am I pronouncing this right? Courtiers? Of what he knew to be true, but they doubted, i.e. that he was not omnipotent. Don't imply that he was surprised to get his feet wet.
Courtier.
Courtier. No, that's right. Courtiers. Was cited, for example, by Stacey Head as typifying the New Orleans City Council responsibility in reference to the King Canute of football for his attempts at stopping the unstoppable tide of information. Okay, gotcha. Cool. Wow. So knowledgeable. By 2015, the old gatekeepers had entered a kind of crisis of confidence, believing they couldn't control the online news cycle any better than King Canute could control the tides. I wonder if this is used improperly then. Maybe this isn't really improper. So they believed that they couldn't control the online news cycle. They knew that they couldn't. And King Canute also knew that he couldn't control the tides. So this is a correct usage of this, right? I think this is right. I think this seems to be correct then. Okay, good job. Wikipedia didn't fail us. Television networks all but let Donald Trump take over as executive producer that summer and fall. In October of 2016, Julian Assange and James Comey seemed to drive the news cycle more than the major news organizations. Many figures in old media and new bought into the idea that in the new world, readers would find the information they wanted to read, and therefore, decisions by editors and producers about whether to cover something and how much attention to give it didn't mean much. But the last 2 weeks have proved the opposite, that the old gatekeepers, like The Journal, can still control the agenda. It turns out there's a big difference between WikiLeaks and establishment media coverage of WikiLeaks, a difference between a Trump tweet and an article about a Trump tweet, even between an opinion piece in the Wall Street Journal suggesting Joe Biden had done bad things and a news article that didn't reach the same conclusion. Perhaps the most influential media document of the last 4 years is a chart by a co-director of the Berkman Klein Center for Internet and Society at Harvard, Yochai Benkler? The study showed that a dense new right-wing media sphere had emerged and that the mainstream news revolved around the agenda that the right-wing media sphere set. Holy yikes. Isn't taking pictures of your ballot illegal? Does Mike still live in Pennsylvania? Pennsylvania, does he still live there? He's throwing away a Pennsylvania vote for a fucking Twitter meme. Wait, is this... That isn't a ballot, it's a meme pic? Is it? I have no idea with Mike. It could be anything. I'm not sure that's how his real ballot looks. Oh, okay. Whatever. He lives with his mom. He's 4 years later not being a Bernie buster. True. Okay. Mr. Bannon had known this too. He described his strategy as anchor left, pivot right, and even as he ran Breitbart News, he worked to place attacks on Hillary Clinton and mainstream outlets. The validating power of those outlets was clear when the New York Times and Washington Post were given early access in the spring of 2015 to the book Clinton Cash, an investigation of the Clinton family's blurring of business, philanthropic, and political interests by the writer Peter Schweizer. Mr. Schweizer is still around this cycle, but you won't find his work in mainstream outlets. He's over on Breitbart with a couple of Hunter Biden stories this month. And the fact that Mr. Bobulinski emerged not in the pages of the widely respected journal, but in a statement to Breitbart was essentially Mr. Bannon's nightmare, and Mr. Benkler's fondest wish. And a broad array of mainstream outlets, unpersuaded that Hunter Biden's doings tied directly to the former vice president, have largely kept the story off their front pages and confined to skeptical explanations of what Mr. Trump and his allies are claiming about his opponent. So USA Today didn't want to run my Hunter Biden column this week. The conservative writer Glenn Reynolds complained October 20th, posting the article instead to his blog. President Trump himself hit a wall when he tried to push the Hunter Biden narrative onto CBS News. This is 60 Minutes, and we can't put on things that we can't verify, Leslie Stahl told him. We watched the video of this yesterday. Is this going to link to the actual... There was like a 2-minute Twitter video of this that we watched yesterday, but... This is 60 Minutes, and we can't put on things we can't verify, Leslie Stahl told him. Mr. Trump then did more or less the same thing as Mr. Reynolds, posting a video of his side of the interview to his own blog, Facebook. The media's control over information, of course, is not as total as it used to be. The people who own printing presses and broadcast towers can't actually stop you from reading leaked emails or unproven theories about Joe Biden's knowledge of his son's business. But what Mr. Benkler's research showed was that the elite outlet's ability to set the agenda endured in spite of social media. We should have known it, of course. Many of our readers screaming about headlines on Twitter did, and Mr. Trump knew it all along. One way to read his endless attacks on the establishment media is as an expression of obsession, a form of love. This week, you can hear howls of betrayal from people who have for years said the legacy media was both utterly biased and totally irrelevant. For years, we've respected and even revered the sanctified position of the free press, wrote Dana Loesch, a right-wing commentator not particularly known for her reverence of legacy media, expressing frustration that the Biden story was not getting attention. Now that free press points its digital pen at your throat when you question... Now that free press points its digital pen at your throat when you question their preferences. On the other side of the gate, there's something amusing, even a bit flattering, in such earnest protestations? How would you pronounce this word? Hold on, fuck. Protestation. There's something amusing, even a bit flattering, in such earnest protestations from a right-wing movement rooted in efforts to discredit the independent media. And this reassertion of control over information is what you've seen many journalists call for in recent years. At its best, it can also close the political landscape to a trendy new form of dirty tricks, as in France in 2017, where the media largely ignored a last-minute dump of hacked emails from President Emmanuel Macron's campaign just before a legally mandated blackout period. But I admit that I feel deep ambivalence about this revenge of the gatekeepers. I spent my career, before arriving at the Times in March, on the other side of the gate, lobbing information past it to a very online audience who I presumed had already seen the leak, or the rumor, seeing my job as helping to guide that audience through the thicket, not to close their eyes to it. The media's new and unfamiliar job is to provide a framework for understanding the wild, unvetted, and incredibly intoxicating information that its audience will inevitably see, not to ignore it. My colleague John Herman, also now at the Times, and I wrote in 2013. In 2017, I made the decision to publish the unverified Steele dossier, in part on the grounds that gatekeepers were looking at it and influenced by it, but keeping it from their audience. This fall, did this guy work at BuzzFeed Media? Wasn't BuzzFeed Media the first media thing that published that? This fall, top media and tech executives were bracing to refight the last war, a foreign-backed hack-and-leak operation like WikiLeaks seeking to influence the election's outcome. It was that hypervigilance that led Twitter to block links to the New York Post's article about Hunter Biden, a frighteningly disproportionate response to a story that other news organizations were handling with care. This isn't true. I don't like that phrasing at all. So to be clear, to be razor clear, the reason why Twitter blocked links to that story was because it violated their hacked materials policy. However, you could still discuss that story. You were still able to write about that story or discuss that story or links to people discussing the story. You just couldn't link to the actual hacked materials. It's a little bit nitpicky, but I think that distinction is very clear. I don't think that it was hypervigilance that led Twitter to block links to the New York Post articles about Hunter Biden. It was following through on their hacked material policy. It is different. That is worth noting, I think. But yeah, because they also blocked that Blue Leaks thing too about cops, which is arguably like an anti-left wing thing. But a frighteningly disproportionate response to a story that others didn't handle with care. The schemes of Mr. Hirschman, Mr. Pasantino, and Mr. Schwartz weren't exactly WikiLeaks, but the special nervousness that many outlets, including this one, feel about the provenance of the Hunter Biden emails is, in many ways, the legacy of the WikiLeaks experience. I'd prefer to put my faith in Mr. Murray, and careful professional journalists like him than in the social platform's product managers and executives. And I hope Americans relieved that the gatekeepers are reasserting themselves will also pay attention to who gets that power and how centralized it is and root for new voices to correct and challenge them. How did Twitter know it was hacked? Well, I mean, like when you publish material from people that is like compromised or whatever, I mean, like it claimed it was, right? They left a laptop somewhere and the materials were gotten in an ill-begotten manner or whatever. I think that would be constitute like the hacked materials policy. So, okay, so I'll explain this again. I don't think you're asking good faith, but I'll explain it for the millionth fucking time for Jackson YouTube chat. LeMayo, hacked materials. Store owner legally owns said hard drive after 90 days and the contents on them. So we've talked about this a million times. It's not true. Just because somebody owns your material doesn't mean that they can make copies of it and publish it online. Secondly, hacked materials. What about Trump's illegally obtained tax returns? What about Russian collusion? I don't know what the Russian collusion thing is if you're just like throwing like buzzwords to try to like win an argument or whatever. But for the New York Times article, I'll tell you this since I know you didn't read it. They never actually published Trump's tax returns in that article, so it wouldn't violate the hacked materials policy. Much the same way that you can have conversations about hacked materials without displaying the hacked materials or ill-begotten materials themselves. To block it for being a hack, they have to establish that it is a hack. Did they do that? My guess is no. They are playing publisher. Okay, that's a Section 230 talking point from the fuck. This is why I can't do. I don't know how like Hassan or Vosh like does this politics thing all day. Like I see like everything like, oh, it's that Tim Pool talking point. Oh, it's that Trump talking point. Oh, it's just like the same regurgitated like unoriginal thought. Like I don't know how you people do this for 10 hours a day. I'd rather play StarCraft and Minecraft. Like all of these like things. It's like I know where you're copy pasting this Section 230 opinion from because I've seen it like a million fucking times from other brain dead dipshits. Like the idea that you're playing publisher by banning like materials that you believe are hacked off a website is the dumbest thing in the fucking world. Like if I go and hack through like a trove of emails and start publishing them on Twitter and they're like other people's like personal information or whatever, like then they have a right to remove that material they want. That's not playing publisher. That's such a stupid fucking thought. Has Glenn Greenwald gone insane? He's obsessed with Hunter Biden. Uh-oh. Wait, really? Do you think Twitter would ban hacked materials if Don Jr. hard drive contents were in an article? No, you can discuss the contents. You just can't post the actual hacked material. So for instance, if you wanted to say they were being inconsistent, then if the New York Times story had pictures of Trump's taxes and they didn't ban it, that would be hypocritical. That's what would rise to the level of equivalence there. Destiny, Section 230 specifically allows them to remove illegal materials without violating the Section 230 safe harbor. Thanks, eSports, man. What is the exact material shown again? New York Post, Biden, Hunter. We went through it on stream. I believe they had actual pictures of some of the claimed to be hacked or stolen emails on that article. If somebody has a link to the original article, we can go back and look at it. But as part of the story, they were posting actual pictures of the material. I don't know how to find the original article now. If they were Trump's laptop instead of Hunter, these same people would be going insane about how unconstitutional it is. Except no, because Twitter already removed all of the hacked materials out of the police departments a long time ago. Or not a long time ago, but several months ago. There was the big blue leaks, and Twitter banned that as well. Nobody was like... Okay, I feel like I should be able to show this on stream. But if you go through the New York Post original story, like there's tons of like I'm 99% sure there's nothing here that like I can't show on stream. But like this stuff is showing like actual like hacked materials that are like that were taken from a lot. I say hacked materials, but they would fall under that stolen policy, like personal photos and stuff that were literally taken off of this laptop. That's why the story violated Twitter made a huge fucking thread about this. Like why Twitter can remove that easily but can't get rid of child pornography. What do you mean? If you see child porn on Twitter, report it. What are you talking about? Does it matter that the Hunter Biden emails are, true? If they're not true, forgeries, why hasn't Hunter or the Biden campaign said so? Which, of course, they would do. And if they are real, maybe they just don't want to give it any more attention. Why even address it if the mainstream media isn't picking up on it? And if they are real, how is that not a legitimate story to report? Because nobody could verify any of the actual information. This is the problem. News, you know what? News outlets are at fault here. I think news outlets should be a little bit more transparent about the work that they go through to vet and verify their stories. When I say news outlets, I mean real news outlets, not like The Intercept. But like, I think it would help everybody to have a little bit more transparency into like how the Washington Post or New York Times or the Wall Street Journal actually goes through the effort of verifying that stories that they're getting are actually true and factual and real. Like all of the corroboration that goes around in that is like that's like writing an article. Okay. Here's. Boom, okay? Journalists in chat might get triggered. This is my take on it. If you're a journalist, the article is like 5% of the work, okay? That's the easy part. Any fucking random dipshit can write an article. It's not that hard. You don't have to tell him to do it. The real work of being a journalist goes into building the connections and building the network of people that you need to have in order to verify and validate the stories that you write about. That's where all the work that goes into in being a journalist. But all we ever see is the 15% or whatever. The 85% is doing all the background shit. We just see like an article that's written. That's all we see. And I feel like people discount how much work goes into actually vetting and verifying stories behind the scenes. This is just like the Tara Reid shit, yeah, which the inner shit also published. Yeah. People just think that like you hear a story from one person and it's true. Like, but anyway, okay. Okay, I think we're good on this. Destiny wrong about Bolivia. I love Bolivia. So, in Bolivia, the CIA led a fascist coup that was overturned by democratic elections. But in the United States, Donald Trump is a fascist, so we could never vote him out of office. That's just stupid. Like, I don't care. Okay. I don't care about any of this anymore. We see the tip of the iceberg. There's so much work that has to be done to get there. I love my job as a journalist. I'm working every night. Sure. We've gone over the receipt memes already. I've been in and out. FBI gave blind dude a receipt for taking the laptop from him, saying that it was for the money laundering department or something. I have no idea. I don't know.
Money. Put money on it. Money. Bet me.
Yes or no? Do you have a Taiwanese power supply inside your rig?
You've seen the power